It was Christmas on the island of Sodor. All the engines were working hard. Thomas and Toby were busy carrying people and parcels up and down the branch line. Everyone was happy. Only the coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, were complaining. "It's always the same before Christmas," they groaned. "We feel so full. We feel so full." "Oh, come on," said Thomas. "Where's your festive spirit? Christmas Day is almost here." By the side of the track was a little cottage with a familiar figure waving to them. "It's Mrs. Kyndley," whistled Thomas. "Beep, beep! Happy Christmas!" Thomas always felt better for seeing her. Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without Mrs. Kyndley, he said to himself. When work was over, Thomas went to see the other engines. All their coats had been polished. "Huh," said Gordon. "Just look at us. Your driver will have to work fast to get you as smart as us." "Never mind that," replied Thomas. "I've something important to say. Do you realize it's been a whole year since Mrs. Kyndley saved us from a nasty accident? You remember when she was ill in bed and—" "Yes, of course," interrupted Edward. "You told us how she waved her red dressing gown out of her window to warn you about a landslide ahead." "And you and Toby gave her presents?" Percy joined in. "And Sir Topham Hatt sent her to the seaside to get better." "But," said the other engines, "the rest of us never thanked her properly." "Exactly," said Thomas. "So now I think we should all give her a special Christmas party." Everyone was getting very excited, and the drivers felt sure that Sir Topham Hatt would agree, as indeed he did. The engines were all busy making plans when silence fell. Sir Topham Hatt had bad news. "The weather's changed badly. Mrs. Kyndley is snowed up. Toby says he'll help to rescue her. You must help too, Thomas. There's no party unless you do." Thomas hated snow, but he said bravely, "I'll try, sir. We must rescue her. We must." "There's a good engine. You and Toby will manage splendidly." Thomas charged the snowdrifts fiercely. Sometimes he swept them aside. Sometimes they stuck fast. And the men had to loosen them. But at the cutting near the cottage, they could go no further. "Look at that!" exclaimed Thomas's fireman. "Beep, beep! Here we are!" An answering wave came from an upstairs window. Then they heard a familiar sound. "That's Terence the Tractor," said Thomas. "He's come to help too." Sure enough, Terence had a snowplow and was working hard to clear a patch to the railroad line and safety. At long last, the rescue was complete. Percy took the tired workmen home. Terence said goodbye to Mrs. Kyndley and promised to take care of her cottage as he watched them all set off. The engines made good time. No more snow had fallen, but the yard was dark. There was no one to be seen. Thomas's heart sank. Suddenly, all the lights went on. What a marvelous sight awaited Mrs. Kyndley. "Well done," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I'm really proud of you all." Mrs. Kyndley especially thanked the smaller engines. "Thomas and Toby are old friends," she said. "And now, Percy, you are my friend too." Percy was very pleased. "3 cheers for Mrs. Kyndley," he called. "Beep, beep, beep." They all whistled. "We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." Thomas the tank engine and his friends thought it was the best Christmas ever, and Mrs. Kyndley could think of nowhere she would rather live than here with them on the Island of Sodor. It was 2 days before Christmas. Many children were expected on the Island of Sodor. All the engines were busy with the final preparations. Sir Topham Hatt wanted this year's carol party to be an extra special celebration. Sir Topham Hatt was now waiting impatiently for Thomas. "Quickly now," he said. "Our Christmas tree has arrived just in time. I want you to fetch it, Thomas. Duck can look after Annie and Clarabelle until you get back." "Will we be able to sing carols too?" asked Thomas. "We'll see," promised Sir Topham Hatt. "It would be nice to sing carols again," sighed Thomas as he set off on his important mission. Thomas collected the tree safely, but large snowdrifts lay ahead. "I mustn't be late," he thought. "Sir Topham Hatt is relying on me." Whistling bravely, Thomas tried to move, but he couldn't. There was worse to come. Thomas was snowed under. Meanwhile, the other engines waited and waited. They were grumbling about Thomas for being late. "Silence," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Thomas left the work safely, but snow has brought the telephone lines down. We must assume he is stranded." The engines now felt sorry for Thomas, and cold but confident, the twins set off to the rescue. Suddenly, they came to a drift that was deeper than the rest. "Help!" "Hush," said Donald. "I can hear something." "Probably the wind," said Douglas. "Help!" "No, listen," insisted Donald. "Over here." "Oh, it's Thomas. Come on, the poor wee engine must be frozen to the frames in there." When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow. Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue. At last, Thomas and the precious Christmas tree were freed from the snowdrift. Then they set off once more to finish their long journey. Sir Topham Hatt greeted them warmly. "As a reward for all your hard work, you may go and enjoy the carols. Be quick now." At the big station, all was soon ready. 1, 2, 3! Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights. "Ladies and gentlemen and children, I give you 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends who have made this occasion possible." Then there was a familiar whirring sound. Percy and Toby smiled. They knew who it was. With landing lights shining brightly, Harold the helicopter touched down gently in the snow. Bringing the greatest surprise of all, Santa Claus. Everyone cheered and the party began. "It's no fun getting stuck in the snow," whispered Thomas to Percy, "but it was worth it for this party. Happy holiday, Percy. Happy holiday, everyone." Autumn had come to the island of Sodor. The fields were changing from yellow stubble to brown earth, and a tractor was hard at work as Thomas puffed along. Later, Thomas saw the tractor close by. "Hello," said the tractor. "I'm Terence. I'm plowing." "I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train. What ugly wheels you've got." "They're not ugly. They're caterpillars," said Terence. "I can go anywhere. I don't need rails." "I don't want to go anywhere," said Thomas. "I like my rails, thank you." Winter came with dark clouds full of snow. "I don't like it," said Thomas's driver. "A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us." "Phew," said Thomas. "Soft stuff, nothing to it." And he puffed on, feeling cold but confident. They finished their journey safely, but by now the country was covered. "You'll need your snowplow for the next journey, Thomas," said his driver. "Phew! Snow is silly, soft stuff. It won't stop me." The snowplow was heavy and uncomfortable and made Thomas cross. He shook it and he banged it, and when they got back, it was so damaged that the driver had to take it off. "You're a very naughty engine," he said to Thomas. Next morning, Thomas's driver and fireman came early and worked hard to mend the snowplow, but they couldn't make it fit. Thomas was pleased. "I shan't have to wear it. I shan't have to wear it," he puffed to Annie and Clarabelle. But they were rather worried. "I hope it's all right. I hope it's all right," they whispered to each other. The driver was worried too. "It's not bad here," he said to the fireman, "but it's sure to be deep in the valley." "Silly, soft stuff," puffed Thomas. "I didn't need that stupid old thing yesterday, and I shan't today. Snow can't stop me." He rushed into a tunnel thinking how clever he was, but there was trouble ahead. "Cinders and ashes," said Thomas. "I'm stuck." And he was. "Back, Thomas, back," said his driver. Thomas tried, but his wheels spun and he couldn't move. The conductor went back for help, while everyone else tried to dig the snow away. But as fast as they dug, more snow slipped down until Thomas was nearly buried. "Oh, my wheels and coupling rods! I shall have to stop here till I'm frozen. What a silly engine I am!" And Thomas began to cry. At last a bus came to rescue the passengers. And then, who should come to Thomas's rescue but Terence? Snow never worries him. He pulled the empty coaches away, then came back for Thomas. Thomas's wheels were clear, but still spun when he tried to move. Terence tugged and slipped and tugged, and at last dragged Thomas clear of the snow, ready for the journey home. "Oh, thank you, Terence. Your caterpillars are splendid," said Thomas. "I hope you'll be sensible now, Thomas," said his driver. "I'll try," said Thomas, and he puffed slowly away. Thank you. One winter evening, Henry's driver said, "We'll be out early tomorrow. We've got to take the Flying Kipper. Don't tell Gordon, but I think if we pull the Kipper nicely, Sir Topham Hatt will let us pull the express. The special coal they gave you is working well." "Hooray!" cried Henry. "That will be lovely." All kinds of ships use the harbor at the big station by the sea. There are passenger ships, cargo ships, and fishing boats also come here. They unload their fish on the quay. Some of it goes to shops in the town, and the rest in a special train to other places far away. This is the train the railwaymen call the Flying Kipper. Henry was ready at 5 o'clock. There was snow and frost. Men hustled and shouted, loading up the crates of fish. The last door banged, the guard showed his green lamp, and the Flying Kipper was ready to go. Come on, don't be silly, puffed Henry to the freight cars. The cars shuddered and groaned. Trickety-trock, all right. That's better, puffed Henry. Clouds of smoke and steam poured from his funnel into the cold air, and the fire's light shone brightly. Hurry, panted Henry. They were going well. The light grew better. Signal lights shone green as they passed. Then a yellow signal appeared ahead. His driver prepared to stop, but the home signal was down. "All clear, Henry. Away we go." They couldn't know the switches from the main line to a siding were frozen, and the home signal should have been set at danger, but snow had forced it down. A freight train was waiting in the siding to let the Flying Kipper pass, and the driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the caboose. "The Kipper is due," said the conductor. "Who cares?" said the fireman. "This is good cocoa." The driver got up. "Come on, fireman, back to our engine." They got out just in time. Henry's driver and fireman had jumped clear before the crash, but Henry lay dazed and surprised. Sir Topham Hatt came to see him. "The signal was down, sir," said Henry. "Cheer up, Henry. It wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crewe, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different engine, and you won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice?" "Yes, sir," said Henry, doubtfully. Henry liked being at Crewe, but was glad to come home. A crowd of people waited to see him arrive in his new shape. He looked so splendid and strong that they gave him 3 cheers. "Beep, beep," he whistled. "Thank you very much." I'm sorry to say that a lot of little children are often late for school because they wait to see Henry go by. They often see him pulling the express. He does it so well that Gordon is jealous. But that's another story. It was a cold winter's morning on the Island of Sodor. The wind was bitter and the ground hard with frost. Thomas and Percy were cold and cross. "All I want is a warm boiler," huffed Thomas. "Firelighter knows that. He's late." "He's not late," replied Percy. "This weather woke us up early." Gusts of wind swirled round the shed, tossing flakes of snow toward Thomas. Then they swooshed round Percy, too. "Why don't we talk about something else?" shivered Percy. "Yes," replied Thomas, "like how silly we'll look when our funnels turn into icicles." "That's not funny. Maybe we'll stop feeling cold if we talk about warm things, like sunshine and steam." "And firelighters," muttered Thomas. "Scarves," continued Percy. "Scarves?" laughed Thomas. "That's what you need, Percy, a woolly scarf round your funnel." Thomas was only teasing, but Percy thought happily about scarves until the firelighter came. Sir Topham Hatt was enjoying hot porridge for breakfast. He was looking forward to taking important visitors on a tour of the railway and had pressed his special trousers. "I shall put them in my trunk," Sir Topham Hatt said to his wife, "and change into them just before the photographs are taken." Then he set off to catch his train. Percy was now working hard. His fire was burning nicely, and he had plenty of steam, but he still thought about scarves. He saw them everywhere he went. "My funnel's cold, my funnel's cold," he puffed. "I want a scarf, I want a scarf." "Rubbish, Percy," said Henry. "Engines don't wear scarves." "Engines with proper funnels do," replied Percy. "You've only got a small one." Before Henry could answer, Percy puffed away. Henry snorted. He was looking forward to pulling the special train. It was time for the photographs. Everyone was excited. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting on the platform for his trousers. They were in a trunk amongst a big load of baggage. The porters were taking the baggage trolley across the line. They were walking backwards to see that nothing fell off. Percy was still being cheeky. His driver always shut off steam just outside the station. Percy wanted to surprise the coaches by coming in as quietly as he could. But the porters didn't hear him either. Percy gave them such a fright that boxes and bags burst everywhere. "Oh!" groaned Percy. Sticky streams of jam trickled down Percy's face. A top hat hung on his lamp iron. Worst of all, a pair of trousers coiled lovingly around his funnel. Everyone was very angry. Sir Topham Hatt seized the top hat. "Mine," he said. "Percy, look at this." "Yes, sir. I am, sir." "My best trousers, too." "Yes, sir. Please, sir." "We must pay the passengers for their spoiled clothes, and my trousers are ruined. I hope this will teach you not to play tricks with the coaches." Percy went off to the yard. He felt very silly. On the way, he met James. "Hello, Percy. So you found a scarf, eh? But legs go in trousers, not funnels." And he puffed away to tell Henry the news. That evening, Thomas and Percy were resting in the shed. Percy's driver had taken away the trousers and given Percy a good rub-down. "Firelighters promised to come early tomorrow," said Thomas. Henry arrived. He'd enjoyed taking the visitors around and now felt sorry for Percy, too. "Driver says the weather will be warmer tomorrow. You won't need a scarf, Percy." "Certainly not," replied Percy. "Engines don't need scarves. Engines need warm boilers. Everyone knows that." Trevor the traction engine enjoyed living in the vicarage orchard. Edward came to see him every day, but sometimes Trevor didn't have enough work to do. I do like to keep busy all the time, he sighed one day, and I do like company, especially children's company. Cheer up, smiled Edward. Sir Topham Hatt has work for you at his new harbor. I'm to take you to meet Thomas today. Oh, exclaimed Trevor happily. A harbor, the seaside, children, that will be lovely. Thomas was on his way to the harbor with a trainload of metal pilings. They were needed to make the harbor wall firm and safe. Hello, Thomas, said Edward. This is Trevor, a friend of mine. He's a traction engine. Thomas eyed the newcomer doubtfully. A what engine? A traction engine, explained Trevor. I run on roads instead of rails. Can you take me to the harbor, please? Sir Topham Hatt has a job for me. Yes, of course, replied Thomas, but he was still puzzled. Workmen coupled Trevor's car to Thomas's train, and soon they were ready to start their journey. I'm glad Sir Topham Hatt needs me, called Trevor. I don't have enough to do sometimes, you know, although I can work anywhere, in orchards, on farms, in scrapyards, even at harbors. But you don't run on rails, puffed Thomas. I'm a traction engine. I don't need rails to be useful, replied Trevor. You wait and see. When they reached the harbor, they found everything in confusion. Cars had been derailed, blocking the line, and stone slabs lay everywhere. We must get these pilings past, said Thomas's driver. They are essential. Trevor, we need you to drag them round this mess. Just the sort of job I like, replied Trevor. Now you'll see, Thomas. I'll soon show you what traction engines can do. Trevor was as good as his word. He dragged the pilings clear with chains and towed them into position. Who needs rails? He muttered cheerfully to himself. Later, Thomas brought Annie and Clarabelle to visit him. Thomas was most impressed. Now I understand how useful a traction engine can be. The coaches were full of children. Trevor gave them rides along the harbor. He liked this best of all. He's very kind, said Annie. He reminds me of Thomas, added Clarabelle. Everyone was sorry when it was time for Trevor to go. Thomas pulled him to the junction. A small tear came into Trevor's eye. Thomas pretended not to see. He whistled gaily to make Trevor happy. I'll come and see you if I can, he promised. The vicar will look after you, and there's plenty of work for you now at the orchard, but we may need you again at the harbor someday. That would be wonderful, said Trevor. That evening, Trevor stood remembering his new friend Thomas, the harbor, and most of all, the children. Then he went happily to sleep in the shed at the bottom of the orchard. Henry the Green Engine has lived on the island of Sodor for many years. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else. He likes every part of it, from the fields filled with flowers to the white sandy beaches. But there is one place that Henry always enjoyed visiting more than any other. His driver knew this too. "Come on, Henry," he would sometimes say. "We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest." Henry loved it here. The forest was full of broad oaks and tall pines. Henry could remember the day long ago when he and Toby brought some new trees to be planted, and Terence and Trevor helped haul them into place. Now he could see the trees growing amongst the others on the hillside. Henry always felt better for being here. He couldn't really explain why, but his driver understood. "It's peaceful," he said to Henry. But one night, everything changed. The engines were resting in the shed. "Listen," said Thomas. "Can you hear a strange whistling sound?" "It's the wind blowing outside our shed," replied Toby, "but I've never heard it like this before." "Do you know," added James, "if Gordon wasn't here now, I'd say it was him thundering by with the express." All the engines laughed, except Henry. "I hope the wind won't harm the forest." By morning, the fierce winds had gone, but the damage was done. Henry's driver came to see him in the yard. "Trees have fallen on the line," he said. "We must help clear the tracks." Donald set off with the breakdown train, and Henry followed. Trees lay everywhere. The hillside now looked so bare. Henry felt sad. "What will happen to all the animals who live here?" he thought. When Henry's flat cars were full of logs, he took them to the timber mill where they would be turned into furniture and other things. Henry was glad the wood was being put to good use, but he was still sorry to lose part of his forest. "Oh dear," sighed Toby to Thomas. "I wish there was something we could do to make things better again." "Yes, indeed," replied Thomas. "But what? We can't mend broken trees." "Hello, Toby," said Sir Topham Hatt. "You do look glum." "I'm sad about the trees," said Toby. "And so is Henry. The forest is a special place to him. Now some of it is gone." "We'll soon put that right," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "I have an important job for you, Toby. I would like you to take some freight cars to the forest." When the freight cars arrived, Toby was delighted. They were full of splendid young trees all ready for planting. "This is the best job I've ever had," said Toby happily. When Henry returned, he was most surprised. There were Terence and Trevor busily helping the workmen clear the torn stumps and branches. "Look, Henry," called Terence, "we're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see." Now, whenever Henry stops by the forest, he can see the new trees growing strong and tall. Sometimes everywhere is very quiet, and at other times Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the distant sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here. Every day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the station to catch his train. "Hello," he always said to Thomas. "Don't let the silly freight cars tease you. Remember, you have an important job as a special helper in the train yard." There were lots of freight cars, and Thomas worked very hard pushing and pulling them into place. There was also a small coach and two strange things his driver called cranes. "That's the breakdown train," he told Thomas. "The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and freight cars." One day, Thomas was in the yard. Suddenly, he heard an engine whistling. "Help! Help!" A freight train came rushing through much too fast. The engine was James, and he was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire. "They're pushing me! They're pushing me!" he panted. "On! On!" laughed the freight cars, still whistling, "Help! Help!" Poor James disappeared. "I'd like to teach those freight cars a lesson," said Thomas the tank engine. Soon came the alarm. "James is off the line! The breakdown train! Quickly!" Thomas was coupled on, and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed. He wasn't pretending to be like Gordon. He really meant it. "Bother those freight cars and their tricks. I hope poor James isn't hurt." James's driver and firemen were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt. "Never mind, James," they said. "It was those silly freight cars and your old wooden brakes that caused the accident." Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled away the unhurt freight cars. "Oh dear! Oh dear!" they groaned. "Serves you right! Serves you right!" puffed Thomas. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. "This'll teach you a lesson, this'll teach you a lesson," he told the freight cars. And they answered, "Yes, it will, yes, it will." They left the broken cars. Then, with two cranes, they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting anxiously for them. "Well, Thomas," he said, "I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you shall have a branch line all to yourself." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Thomas. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line and two coaches called Annie and Clarabelle. He puffs proudly backwards and forwards with them all day. He is never lonely. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry, but never forgets to say, "Boop, boop," and Thomas always whistles, "Beep, beep," in return.